This is a sound check for those of you watching live. If you are watching live, please make sure your speakers are working. There is somebody talking. If you can hear me, then great. If not, please go ahead and check it, and then we're going to turn the mic back off in just a second. If you're watching live, there is somebody. So welcome. This is our iReady session for March 4th. This is a makeup from last week. Thank you guys so much for being here. To our virtual participants, please make sure you go ahead and sign in. You are getting credit no matter what. The sign-in is virtual at bit.ly iReady March 4th. If you see virtual participants, if you see somebody standing up here, that means somebody's talking. If you don't see somebody standing up here, please feel free to turn your volume down, because that means we're working collaboratively, and you can work collaboratively with your groups as well. But unless you see somebody standing up here, there's probably not anything you need to hear at the moment. This is being recorded for those of you. And also for our virtual participants, you should see a Q&A button in the top right corner of your screen. You can submit questions online, and we do have somebody available who can answer those questions for you or get in touch with you. And we do have some tech support here as well. So just so that you know, and I'll give us a second to go ahead and get started. I'm going to step off camera for a second. All right, now we're going to move on. Yes, we are going to get out of here earlier than 5, much earlier than 5. So our goals today are to analyze and compare our iReady data from diagnostic to diagnostic from a teacher viewpoint. We also want to investigate ways to authentically integrate iReady into our classrooms, and we also want to look at ways to monitor student progress and student online instruction. At the end, we're going to talk about some next steps and some hot topics in Johnston County Schools. And then we're also going to talk about some available resources and some support that's coming up as well. Your goal here as your school's iReady team is to take this stuff back and give it back to your PLCs. Being here or watching this original broadcast, you're now the expert. So it's your goal to take it back and make sure that your PLCs know what you know as well. We are going to have you guys do a feedback form at the end. This is for 2 reasons. One, for our virtual participants, we need to know how this went for you. But also, we need to know how support has gone this year from a district perspective, outside of our consultant, but from a district perspective. What's gone well this year? What do you want to see continue next year to help iReady implementation at your school? So please make sure you do that at the end, because every opinion counts, even the virtual opinions. So I do want to go ahead and welcome our iReady consultants. If we could go ahead, virtual participants and participants here, let's pull up 2 tabs. Let's pull up the iReady in 1 tab. And then if we could also pull up the iReady for JCS folder available at bit.ly/iReady 2015. And we're going to show you what that looks like. The reason we want to pull that up is because that's where all of our presentations are, all of our resources are, so you can follow all these presentations on your own laptop as well. So Jenna, if you'll pull that up for us. And here's what it looks like when you open it up. You have tons of resources in here, but all the presentations are actually in this that I'm covering up. You'll see a folder called March 4th, and everything we're doing today is in that March 4th folder. To add this to your drive, just click the blue button in the top right and then open it in your drive, and it'll always be in your drive. We are starting with the second presentation. You'll see it in a second. But if we'll go back to our presentation, we have one more really important thing to say before we really get started with Miss Jan Deans. Thank you, Jenna. One more quick thing. We have a lot of misconceptions about the role of iReady in our classrooms and in our schools. Just keep this in mind as we talk this afternoon. iReady is the support, not the driver. Nothing will ever replace teachers, ever. Nothing will ever replace the mastery of an expert practitioner in the classroom. iReady is just the support for that person. So please keep that in mind as we talk today, and please don't let anyone tell you differently. And we do want to go ahead and welcome our iReady consultants. They're going to walk us through some things and help us out with understanding from the teacher view. This is Jan Deans. Many of you know her already. She's visited your schools before as the iReady consultant. And I'm going to hand it over to her, and we'll let her talk to us a little bit.
Thank you so much, Katie. And everybody, it's fantastic to see all of you again. We are going to start our coaching visits in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to be back in your schools visiting with you, and Ellen Benton will be back as well, and she's looking forward to being with you also. We have a guest with us, Kathleen Kasuli, who's going to be assisting me. So Kathleen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
You're welcome. Kathleen is going to be walking around monitoring. So if you have questions about anything that we're talking about, if you raise your hand, Kathleen will come to you and she's going to give you some assistance. Okay? So today is really understanding data after the second diagnostic. So I am going to really be acting more as a facilitator to you. So this is not to be thought of as another iReady training. I'm going to be facilitating you as you actually get into your data and take a deeper dive in looking and comparing and analyzing between Diagnostic 1 and Diagnostic 2. Everyone should have a brand new teacher training guide. If you want to write the word new, just so you won't get confused, this is your new one. So it actually has more pages than the last one that you received. So go ahead and write your name on it and write the word new. This is the one that you can refer to now. And you also have a handout, and that handout is called Using iReady Diagnostic as a Student Growth Measure. So we will be referring to that as well. So everyone should have the teacher training guide and a handout. By the end of this particular session, you should be able to analyze, interpret, compare, and use diagnostic data from iReady. Manage online instruction to maximize student impact, monitor student progress, and use iReady data and resources to plan for small group instruction. So those are our marching orders. You remember our model for the diagnostic begins with diagnose down to the subskill level, and that diagnostic information actually informs 2 levels of instruction, the teacher-led and the student-driven, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk about both of those today. And then you're able to monitor everything that happens. You're able to monitor what happens when students take the diagnostic, and you're also able to monitor what happens when students are completing those online lessons. iReady Central is a brand new launch. I'm not sure how many of you have actually been into iReady Central. It is a content hub that contains everything that we know and everything that we've created surrounding iReady. So articles, blogs, research, tips, cheat sheets for reports, manuals, fun stuff, certificates, stickers, all of those kinds of things will be found in iReady Central. If you look from the home page under What's the Buzz, you'll actually see a link that will always be there for iReady Central. But just in case you want to get to iReady Central and not actually be in iReady, if you want to jot down someplace that you're taking notes today, www.i-readycentral.com.
Let's review all the websites we've given you. We've given you a lot of places to go, and I'm realizing that as I'm talking to people around, so I'm sure that's happening to our virtual participants too. The place where all the presentations is stored and all the iReady resources for Johnston County Schools, that's bit.ly, bit.ly/iReady2015. Okay, just be sure we got that. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Here's an agenda that we're going to follow this afternoon. Section 1, comparing diagnostic data. Section 2, use online instruction to support students. Section 3, monitor progress. Section 4, planning for differentiated instruction using iReady resources. And then Katie's going to conduct your closing. You've already logged into iReady, so everybody's ready to go. And our first big question is, how can I monitor my students' progress with iReady by comparing diagnostic results? So you guys have actually brought a copy, a hard copy of results from your first diagnostic. But just in case you did not do that, you're going to be able to go into iReady and actually pull up information about the first diagnostic, save it as a PDF, and then go back into iReady and pull up information about the second diagnostic. For some of you that are really clever, I know you're going to be able to put these two PDFs side by side, but if you are a little bit challenged with technology the way I am, I probably would not be able to pull both of those up, and so I would end up just going into iReady and checking on diagnostic 1 and then checking on diagnostic 2. So any way that you feel comfortable about doing that is really totally fine. So just know that we're going to begin that process of taking a look. So for our first step, you're going to be pulling a class profile report. You may pull that report for reading or for math, or for reading and math. That's totally up to you, depending on what you currently teach. You're going to look at the performance comparing Diagnostic 1 and Diagnostic 2. If you brought a hard copy, that's great. If you did not, remember when you pull your class profile report, you can choose your testing window. So if you choose test window 1 and then compare it with test window 2, that will be exactly what you need to do. So I'm going to leave this up because these are some of the things that we want you to take a look at as you're comparing. How has your student placement distribution changed? Does it match what's happening with your classroom instruction? What can you celebrate as you're looking at the class profile reports? And where might you need to still focus some intervention between now and your end of grade test? So we're going to probably turn the microphone off. So I'm sorry?
Log into iReady.
Okay, so Jenna's going to log into iReady. And we're just going to review that process of pulling up a class profile report for everyone. So Jenna will go under the Reports tab, and then she's under Class Reports, so she's going to choose a class profile. And then she will look at window 1 as compared to window 2, or she will set a window. This is remember our demo account, and so it only has window 1, but you have that capability of comparing. And then when she pulls that report, you're going to be able to look at performance by domain first, and actually compare that with the second diagnostic. And then after you do that, you can look at performance by student and actually compare, and we're going to talk about a little more that we'll compare there in just a minute. Okay?
And here's why I wanted to pull this up for our high schools. Our high schools did not test within a beginning of year, middle of year window. So if we go back, instead of clicking window 1, you're actually going to have to click set window and select that month that you tested. So some of you, it might have been October or December, depending on when your school picked up iReady. That's why we wanted to pull this up, and you can clarify what that month is by using those little calendar emblems. So we are going to turn the microphone off. When you see somebody back up here, that means somebody's talking again.
Okay, we're going to take another step in our analysis of the class profile report. So now I would like for you to compare average scale scores for overall reading and math. You're going to be using your handout on page 3, using iReady Diagnostic as a student growth measure. As you're turning and looking at page 3, I would like for you to check to see if your growth, the growth of your students in scale scores, is within the range for half a year, a whole year, or more than 1 year. So check your charts, think about what can be celebrated and where you need to focus. Okay, when we're talking about page 3, we're talking about this handout, using iReady Diagnostic as a student growth measure. So we're talking about the 3rd page actually in this handout. So this is what we're talking about. So I think, Jenna, are you pulling this up as well? Katie, did you want Jenna to pull it? Yeah. So it's in the shared folder. And so Jenna's going to also pull this up. But this is where we're talking about. This is the document that we're talking about looking at. Okay.
So in the iReady folder, you're going to placements and growth. And each school is actually getting lots of handouts of this to take back, but everybody has a digital copy of it. She actually pulled up the iReady growth targets chart. If we scroll down, we've downloaded it. But if we scroll down, let's see which one matches. This is actually talking about growth and how growth is calculated. So here's what she's talking about. Right here, you can see for reading and then for math, this is how growth is calculated in iReady. We have 3/4 of a year of growth, which is great to have. We have 1 year of growth, which is really what you're going to want to highlight and look at. You have 1.5 years of growth, and then you have 2 years of growth. Why we want you to highlight growth, that represents a student making 1 year of progress from the beginning of year to the end of the year. So let's do an example. And I'm going to have somebody right here yell out for me. If I'm looking at grade 5 reading, what is the range for 1 year that a student should grow? 19 to 27 points. Well, it's tough to measure a range. It sure will be nice if we can narrow that down to one number for everybody. That's why we're actually going to use the 1 year suggestion, which actually also happens to be the bottom number in that range. So 5th graders, all 5th graders in reading are shooting for growing 19 points from the beginning of year to the end of the year in reading. All kindergartners are shooting for growing 32 points from the beginning of the year to the end of the year in math, and that's scale score points. You're going to see a lot of your students have already exceeded that, but that is the goal from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. We feeling good out there for the people that are here? Okay, I see a lot of nods here, so I'm hoping for our virtual participants, that's good too. If not, please feel free to comment on the Q&A. And we're gonna step off camera and let you look at that a little bit more.
Okay, we are ready now for analysis, step 3 of the class profile report. So if you would compare student by student sections using sorting arrows to see overall scale score columns, what changes stand out to you for individual students? What can you celebrate, and where do you need to focus for individual students? Okay, now I would like for everyone to choose a student. It may be a student that you're very concerned about, and let's run a student profile report. We are going to just compare this particular student's student profile report from one diagnostic to diagnostic number 2. Look at the overview screen. Is the student making average yearly growth? Is the student moving closer to grade level? I'm sorry? Yes, we're going to pull it up in iReady. So Jenna is going to pull it up for us. So we're going to actually walk through creating a student profile report. All right, so we need to move and click on the little sub-tab Student Reports. So once we do that, that opens up the menu for us, and we can choose Student Profile Report. And then we can choose whatever grade level, math or reading, and pull our student, and then create the report. Remember, we're comparing Test 1 to Test 2. Across the top of the student profile report, you're actually going to see the domains in which the student was tested. You will also see a tab for a quantile score. If you're looking at a math report, you'll see a tab that will allow you to get a Lexile score if you're looking at a reading report. So the first information that we're going to get, obviously, is overall performance. And then as we scroll down, we're going to get information, detail, domain by domain. And then as we continue to scroll down, we see developmental analysis. So this developmental analysis is prescriptive language that's based on the diagnostic. So this language uses your student's name. If you have an opportunity to read the analysis, you'll see that your student's name is used in that language. So this is very appropriate for you to cut and paste. It belongs to you now. It's based on a diagnostic. So if you need to use this language as you're doing report cards or progress reports or IEPs or PEPs, this is very appropriate for you to use. So take a look at this, and we're going to stop right here, and we're going to take our next step of analysis in a few minutes after you've had an opportunity to actually look here and for your particular student.
One thing to point out for Johnston County Schools, Jenna, if we'll go back to, yes, thank you. Notice right here where it says standard view, make sure you're choosing standard view at this time of year. We're past beginning of year view now. We're now well into the school year. We should be using standard view at all times. The other thing to keep in mind under show, a couple of us have students who have taken more than 2 diagnostics. If you want it to show a specific diagnostic but not show one in between, you're actually a little bit out of luck. If a child has taken, let's say, 3 diagnostics total because they took 2 diagnostics during the second window, it's going to show everything before that as well. So please keep that in mind. But whatever test you want to show, if you want to show the most recent test, you'll choose that most recent test to show all the other ones as well. We are going to give you some working time now. Just want to give you that little update there. Okay.
Okay, let's take step 2 now in our analysis of the student profile report. If you would scroll up to the top of the student profile report, you'll see the domains in which your student was tested. If you would click on one of those tabs and go behind a domain in which you have an interest or a concern, and look at the information that is provided for you behind the domain tab, know that you will have that same level of detail provided under each domain tab. So let's take a few minutes now and look at particular domains for some of those questions that you may have about students that you're concerned about. We're going to now take a look at an instructional grouping profile for one of your classes. Jenna, in just a minute, is going to bring it up for us so that we can all remember how to pull an instructional grouping profile for either reading or for math. And I'd like for you to look for any students who have changed profiles. If you find any students that have actually moved from profile 1 to profile 2, etc., you should really celebrate that, because it is extremely difficult for students to actually move profiles, to make changes in profiles. So that's a real celebration. Look for additional differentiation needed and where you need to focus now that you've had a second diagnostic. So Jenna, if you'll take us into iReady. The instructional grouping profile is actually a class report. So Jenna's going to highlight this little sub menu that says class reports, and she's going to pull straight down and choose instructional grouping profile. Then she's going to choose a class. You can choose math or reading, or you can choose math and reading if you have an opportunity to look at both. And then she's going to actually create the report. She's going to look at diagnostic 1 and then compare it to diagnostic 2. When you pull your instructional grouping profile, you're going to see across the top of the report tabs that indicate the 5 small groups: profile 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As we continue to scroll down, we're going to see a student placement distribution, the number of students that you will find in each of your profiles. Occasionally, you will see less than 5 profiles. Some classes may fall into profile 1, 2, and 5, or 2, 4, and 5, or different combinations of the 5 profiles. On the right side of the screen, you're going to see a rubric that tells you how students are actually placed within each of the profiles. And of course, that's based on their performance on the diagnostic. So if students are placed in profile 1, that's because they have scored below level in phonics with a limited vocabulary. Or in math, they are below level in numbers and operations, or algebra and algebraic thinking, and they're 2 or more grade levels below in number and operations, or algebra and algebraic thinking. So that rubric will help you see how students are actually placed. And then as you continue to scroll down, you'll see the names of the students. The names of the students that are in the 5 profiles. And then if Jenna will take us back up to the top of the report, you're going to actually use the profile tabs. And Jenna, if you'll click on profile 1, you're actually going to use those tabs to go behind each of the profiles and take a look at the information, the detail that is provided for you there. There will be priorities, instructional priorities, resources, students needing additional differentiation. All of that information will be there behind the profile tabs. So if you take just a little bit of time now, and let's compare the instructional grouping profile from diagnostic 1 to diagnostic 2, that would be great. Katie?
One thing to note, she did show those lessons up there, so just keep that in mind as well. Somebody did ask, is there another way to group students besides the instructional grouping profile? We'll talk about that, but look at your instructional grouping profile first, and then we'll talk about other ways to group students. Go ahead.
If you would now take your teacher training guides and turn to pages 44, 45, and 46. We want to talk just a little bit about how the student's online lesson is adjusted each time that student takes the diagnostic. Information about the adjustments are on these pages in your teacher training guide. So you please feel free to mark these and go back and take a look at these if you have any additional questions. 4 scenarios are possible. Imagine at the beginning of the year, your students took one diagnostic and entered online instruction. They've just completed their second diagnostic, and our example is student 1, the high flyer. This student scored higher on their second diagnostic than their first, so the high flyer jumps ahead in the lesson path based on growth their second diagnostic shows. So keep doing what you're doing. You're doing perfect. Student number 2, the leaping lesson leaper. This student showed growth on their second diagnostic, but they're already beyond that level in online instruction. The lesson leaper stays the course. Their online lesson plan is not changed. So you can gather some information about that particular student. Student 3, the steady study. This student's score on the second diagnostic was lower than the first, but just a little lower. This student's previous lesson path is not changed. They stay on the same path. And again, this is a student that you would watch. Student number 4, the struggling student. This student's score on the second diagnostic is significantly lower than their score from the first diagnostic. The struggling student drops back to a lower placement level in online instruction. What do you think this is going to say? What do you think this little cloud is going to say? Right. Who said intervene? Everybody? So intervention needed. So this would be the student that you're definitely going to provide intervention. Okay. A brand new report was just sent out to all of us in December called the Instructional Usage Report, and it has revolutionized. It really has. I have been all over the state, and ever since this report came out, it's really made a difference for teachers and students and schools, because now we are able to see specifically the amount of time students are spending on online instruction, student by student, in particular classrooms. So I would like for you, and Jenna's going to help us get there, I would like for you to actually go into class reports and pull up an instructional usage report for one of your classes, and we're going to take a look at what you'll see. Okay, remember, Jenna is pulling up my demo account, so my demo account doesn't have any time in it. But if you go under class reports, under the reports tab, and you select instructional usage for your either reading class or math class, you are going to see some data. The data that you're going to see is this. Overall, for last week, the percent of active students meeting the 45 minutes of instruction, and then their average time on task. And then the weekly average for the last 4 weeks, the percent of active students meeting the 45 minutes of instruction and their average time on task. And then the number of students using instruction, active students, compared to the total number of students enrolled. As we scroll down just a little bit and we look at week to date, time on task. So today is Friday. Our students' time today will actually upload by midnight tonight, okay? So every night, our students' time on task will upload by midnight so that you can see week to date, how much time are my students getting in the on iReady online instruction in reading and in math. How much time should we see per week? Who can tell me? Excellent. 45 minutes a week of online instruction in reading and 45 minutes a week of online instruction in math. Then we can see last week for time on task, and then we can see an average for the last 4 weeks. So if you'll take a look at a couple of your classes, and let's compare what you're seeing student by student, and if there are particular students that you feel are of a concern to you, if you'll jot those names down, that would be great. Let me just put out there a couple of things for you to remember. This is calculating the time spent on the lessons. So this is completed lessons or lessons in progress. What this is not counting is this is not counting time on the diagnostic, and this is not counting time on the growth monitoring, and it's not counting time that they're spending on their little games where they spend their credits, where they're changing their avatar or their theme. So it's not calculating that time as well. So it's only on the lessons, in progress lessons or completed lessons. So we're going to give you just a minute now to take a look at some of your instructional usage. great job taking a look at instructional usage reports. There were some excellent questions as we were circulating around. One of the most important things for you to remember, when we talk about the 45 minutes a week of online instruction in reading and math, we also have to talk about monitoring the online instruction, because it's that monitoring piece that's going to marry with the usage and get the growth for the students. For example, if I have a student that was assigned, unfortunately, 20 extra lessons, and that student failed every single one of those extra lessons, would my student show usage? Yes. Would my student show growth? No. Okay, so we've got to have that monitoring piece marry with the usage in order to show growth. Therefore, it is very important for you to be monitoring every week for lesson alerts. So Jenna's going to take us into iReady from the home page. There is a question on the teacher's screen. So school admins don't see this particular question, but it's there for teachers in the teacher view. That question is, which students are struggling with online lessons? So please now click on that question. Which students are struggling with online lessons? If you are seeing orange triangle alerts as you click, that means that that particular student has failed 2 lessons and a domain has been turned off. If you see a yellow alert, that means that that student has failed 1 lesson and is in danger of having a domain turned off. This is where you need to check weekly in order to make sure that students are not falling through the cracks and getting usage but not showing growth. So you remember, I'm sure, from our past trainings, what you do next. Who can tell me what we need to do next? If we see a student with an orange triangle alert, what do we do next?
Intervention.
Okay. We are charged with identifying what domain has been turned off, what are the 2 lessons that that student has failed, offering intervention or help with those 2 lessons, and then turning the domain back on. So all of that has to happen before you turn the domain back on. Katie said a really beautiful thing to you at the beginning when she introduced our session. She said nothing can happen with iReady without you. Nothing can happen with it. Any place we go, anywhere in the world, if we see good iReady programs happening, it's because of you, the teacher. So nothing can happen with iReady without you. You are critical to this. You're the driver, right? Katie had the car. You're the driver, and we're supporting you. So when students fail 2 lessons and have a domain turned off, you are going to come in with your expertise as their teacher, and you're going to identify the domain that's been turned off, the lessons that have been failed, and you're going to offer intervention and turn those lessons back on. Katie, do we need to go through that? Okay. All right. So Jenna, if you'll click right on John Alvarez in math. All right, so this takes me right to the student response to instruction report. This is where I'm going to do my detective work, because I have to find out what domain has been turned off and what lessons have been failed. So Jenna's going to scroll down just a little bit for me. And keep going just a little bit, Jenna. Okay, if you'll stop right there for me. All right, I can look at the different domains, and I can see in the last column the domain status. So if I look at algebra and algebraic thinking, I can see that John did complete 4 lessons, but he has a 0% pass rate. So that particular domain has been turned off. Does everybody see that with me? Okay, what I need to do now is I need to go to that domain, that algebra and algebraic thinking. So Jenna's going to scroll down just a little more for me. And now, Jenna, if you'll stop. This is the algebra and algebraic thinking domain, and it's showing me the 4 lessons that have been failed. Do you see the fail, 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 fail? That's my cue. That's what I'm looking for. When I'm looking at this report, I want to see those 4 fails. That's my cue. Now I know the 2 lessons that John failed 4 times because he had 2 tries on the properties of multiplication, and he had 2 tries on using fact families to solve division problems, but he failed both tries. And so now iReady has said, I have to turn that domain off because I don't want John to go any further without alerting his teacher and getting this taken care of. So if Jenna will take me all the way up to the top of the report, we're going to go behind the assignments tab now. And we're going to click on lesson plans, and we're going to select John's class. So if you hold it down for me, Jenna, I'll tell you his class. If you'll scroll down. Okay, it's elementary intervention mathematics, and we're looking for John Alvarez. Now this is my view of his plan. This is the back door or the teacher's view. John never sees this view. You know he has his own screen going on. At all times I can see 20 lessons that are loaded in the queue. And then I can see each of the domains in which he was tested. And you see the little word off right there under algebra and algebraic thinking. Is that correct? Okay, so Jenna, would you click on the algebra and algebraic thinking for me, and let's just open it up. Do you see the on-off button? That's a radio dial. All it takes is a click on. Do that for me, Jen, if you don't mind. She did. And then click back on off. Okay, we want to leave it off until we offer the intervention. So Jenna's going to just click, you would click save, but Jenna's got to click cancel in the demo account. Okay, so we want to talk about how do you offer intervention. One of the things that you need to remember is you are the regular classroom teacher with so much on your plate. You've got to have something that's fast and effective, right? So I'm going to just put out there a couple of ideas that are fast and effective. So Jenna's going to click on completed lessons for me, right there. These are the completed lessons for John Alvarez. So would you scroll all the way down for me, Jenna? Thank you. I can bring John up, and I can click right on the lesson, properties of multiplication, right at the bottom, Jenna. Thank you. It opens up in such a way for me as the teacher. It doesn't open this way for John. John has his path through the lesson, which starts with explicit instruction, guided practice, and the quiz. But for me, it opens it up, it breaks it open, so I could go into any part of it. So if I call John up and I just click on the quiz, he and I could do just a couple of the quiz items together, and I could make a determination because I have him here, so he's giving me feedback. So I don't have to guess about why he's missing it. It may be that he just needs a basic review of the multiplication and division fact families. And that's what I determine as he and I are spending a little bit of time together. So Jenna, if you would close this and close the look. In this instance, I could do something like this because I'm doing it thoughtfully as an intervention. So Jenna, if you'll go to extra lessons for me and add lessons in algebra and algebraic thinking, and next, this opens the whole bank of extra lessons for me. So Jenna, could you find lesson 50? Lesson 50 is multiplication and division fact families on a 3rd grade level. John Alvarez is a 5th grade student failing multiplication and division on a 4th grade level. I'm going to assign a prerequisite lesson on an early third grade level, which is a review, a basic review of multiplication and division. So Jenna, would you go ahead and add that, please? I'm going to call John up and I'm going to talk to him and I'm going to say, John, it looks like you were having some trouble with the multiplication and division fact family. So I have added a lesson for you. Today, I want you to click on the blue button that says Start Extra Lessons. After you complete that lesson, I'm going under Completed Lessons. And Jenna, if you'll go up to the top again for me, thank you. And I'm going to check to see if you pass it or fail it, John. And then we're going to make our next decision after that. Okay, so that's pretty fast, right? I didn't have to hunt. I didn't have to look. I didn't have to duplicate. I didn't have to, I didn't have to do a lot of things. I could handle it very quickly there. But intervention is limitless. So I could have used anything. I could have used a tool for instruction, right, that had been embedded in his plan. I could have gone into the teacher toolbox. I could have pulled a ready lesson or a practice in problem solving, or I could have used anything in the teacher toolbox, or I could have actually used something that's in my classroom. So if I had some multiplication and division games or activities, I could have used those. So intervention is limitless. It doesn't have to be iReady. But what it does have to be is fast and effective, right? Because you don't have a lot of time. Okay? All right. So Jenna, would you take us back now into our presentation? Everybody okay with this? Can you give me a thumbs up if everybody's okay? Good job. Good job. How can I monitor progress? Okay, remember the big diagnostics come 3 times a year. They're the ones that actually refresh all the reports, make the changes in the student placement every 12 to 18 weeks. You've also been experiencing growth monitoring with your students, which comes every 30 days. That's the small temperature check that your students undergo, about 15 questions, about 20 minutes. How much growth should my student make? Is my student on track?
Before we do this,
yes,
let's take 1 second. There's a lot of questions that people are having, and before we get into growth monitoring, that's a big, let me do what I said I was going to do. This is a big topic, and I want to make sure we have our other questions answered before that. So let's take a second, talk to whoever you need to talk to. We're going to talk about that time on task and the online lessons and doing the extra lessons. Let's talk about that a little bit, play a little bit for a couple minutes, then we'll dig into growth monitor. Give you a couple minutes.
Good job, everybody. This is our last part. We're going to talk about growth monitoring. So we're going to unpack the growth monitoring report together. I would like for you to turn in your teacher training guide to page 88 and 89. This is a great cheat sheet for the growth monitoring report. You can also pull this cheat sheet and other cheat sheets for all the other reports from iReady Central. But this is a really good one to have before you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the growth monitoring report as we unpack it. And then Katie, of course, with her expertise and her knowledge of Johnston County, will step in after that. And we'll talk a little bit more about growth monitoring with you. I'm just basically highlighting some of the pieces that we will take a look at together. We will start with the projected growth line. This is really important because it's confusing. We need 3 calendar months, 3 different calendar months. You can see this report has highlighted at the bottom September, October, and November. 3 separate calendar months of any combination of the diagnostic and the growth monitoring assessments in order to begin to build the trajectory for your student. So you might want to jot that down someplace so that you don't get confused. When you are looking at the growth monitoring report, there are a lot of pieces of information that are being compared on one page. Sometimes that's a little bit overwhelming, so therefore we're just going to take each piece at a time and talk about it. Your student's trajectory is the black dashed line. So if you're looking at the pages that I referenced in the teacher training guide, your student's trajectory is the black dashed line. That's the projected growth for your student. That is based on an algorithm. It is not just a plotting of the points using the scale scores that your students made on the diagnostic. So please don't get confused about that, okay? It's a very complicated algorithm. Just like with any assessment that you give, it doesn't matter where it comes from or who publishes it, there's always going to be a standard error of measurement. We call that our level of confidence, and you see it in that green shaded area. There's always going to be a standard error of measurement. The very fine black dotted line that just came down vertically will indicate where your students what month your student's last assessment took place. For this student, it was January. Down at the bottom of the report, you will see a tracking with D for diagnostic, GM for growth monitoring, the date that the test was taken, and the standard error of measurement will all be tracked at the bottom of the growth monitoring report. Also on this report, you'll see a dark green triangle that will have your grade level. At the top of the triangle, it will say mid to late. At the bottom of the rectangle, I think I said triangle. Sorry. I know everybody's like, what? Sorry. Rectangle. At the top of the dark green rectangle, you'll see mid to late. At the bottom of the dark green rectangle, you'll see early. If your student's trajectory is such that it is leading you to see that that student is projected to be early grade level, is your student projected to be on or above grade level at the end of the year? No. Very good answer. If a student's on early third grade level at the end of third grade, is that student on or above grade level? No, right? Is that correct? Everybody understand what I'm saying? So when you're looking at the projection or the projected growth, think about that. It's not just that the student is hitting the dark green rectangle. It's where that projected line is actually hitting, okay? I know Katie's cringing over there. I can just see her with my high level of statistics and math. I know she's cringing. Okay. The turquoise line that has just appeared on the graph is comparing our student to a nationally normed 50th percentile median student, I-ready student of the same grade level that took the diagnostic. And then the little point that's being plotted is showing average growth. So it's taking the average growth that that nationally normed 50th percentile student made and adding it to our student's first score and plotting a point. And now we're going to see, can our student make average growth? We're going to be able to monitor to see if that can happen as well. And then the heavy black line that has just appeared on the graph is a targeted score set by your school district. So your school district has set 1 year's growth. Remember Katie talking to you about that? And she showed you exactly the number. It's the lower number in the range in your handout. 1 year's growth is what your district has set as a target. So you're going to be able to look at all this information, but I don't want you to worry about that because we are actually going to summarize that information for you. So if you're a little bit confused saying, well, you know, I'm not sure about that trajectory. Is it really early third grade or is it mid to late third grade? Don't worry about that. We are actually going to summarize it for you at the top of the report. So remember we looked at Jasmine and I said, does Jasmine look like she's on target to be on or above grade level? And all of you said no. You were correct because when we summarize it, we say no, she's not. We say she is projected to meet average grade level growth. And we think we're 50% sure she's going to meet her targeted growth, but we are more than 50% sure that she is not going to be on or above grade level. So that's information about the growth monitoring report. I don't want you to get frustrated about it. There's an awful lot of information on there. Katie's going to talk a little more about it for us. If you know what you're looking for in your student's projection, you're looking at that heavy black dashed line, and you're looking at where does that line lead as I'm looking at that dark green rectangle. Is it early? Is it mid to late? And then I can look at the summary as well. So would you like to talk further, Katie, about that?
I'll just add in one thing. That was a great summary of it. And I'm going to go back to one that showed the whole thing to us. I know a lot of times we look at these symbols as teachers and we go, that is pretty harsh with that big red X up there. But keep in mind, they're being very conservative here. Remember this green box, this vertical green box? That means the student could end up as high as the top of the vertical box or as low as the bottom. Where that projection is ending is the best estimate based on what I-Ready knows. And I-Ready, all that I-Ready knows is the growth monitor and the diagnostic assessment results. That's all it's basing it off of. So based on what I-Ready knows about the student, this student is projected to make their growth, and we're pretty confident in that, great. Not necessarily projected to be on grade level, mid-level, that's our goal by the end of the year, but at mid-level by the end of the year. So that's awesome. He's going to make his growth. If we want him to be on grade level, then he probably needs a little bit more remediation on grade level concepts that he's struggling with. I am going to give you a second to dig a little bit deeper into your growth monitor, ask some questions. I'll also tell you this, especially for our virtual people, in the I Ready Google folder, and Jenna, if we want to pull that up real quick, we know there's a lot of questions on this, so we've actually done a quick-ish screencast on just understanding the growth monitor. We took 3 different examples of students and kind of showed how to read each one. It's in the folder titled, actually it's not in 1 minute tips because it's 10 minutes long, so that seemed like a lie to begin with. It's in presentations. And we did one originally when these questions started to come up, but we have one thing called Understanding the Growth Monitor. We videotaped that in the fall when we first started doing growth monitors. It's a little bit outdated. We have more information now. You're going to want to use the one that says updated. Okay, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to look at your growth monitor, and then we're going to dig into some hot topics in Johnston County Schools and those big questions in the back of your mind. So a couple of things that have come up. So a lot of you still have questions about that growth monitor. When do you really freak out? If the X's are really being that conservative, when should you really be concerned? Well, let's think about it this way. If you have a student who's below grade level and they're not projected to be on grade level by the end of the year, and they're not projected to make their growth, that's a student we need to be very concerned about. If we have a child who's above grade level and not projected to meet their growth, that might be a secondary. But they're already on grade level, so maybe we're shooting for them to make more of 3/4 of a year of growth rather than a year of growth. We really want to focus in on those students who are below grade level, not projected to meet their growth, and not projected to be on grade level. Does that make sense? That's where we really need to focus our attention. For those students who are below grade level, if they are not projected to meet their growth and they're not projected to be on grade level, those are the students you really want to be concerned about. Okay? We'll talk about that a little bit more. We're going to talk about what's up here in a second. Keep in mind the next growth monitor does start on Monday. Just keep that in mind. A couple of your schools have contacted us about pushing it back just a couple days for some reasons, and we're happy to support you there. Another thing that has come up is a lot of people have been asking, is there another way to group outside of the instructional grouping profile? Absolutely. Let's suppose I'm a 5th grade teacher, and at some point in the year I get the geometry, and I know it's a weak point for my students before I get to the EOG. Maybe I just want to group students on that. I can certainly pull up a class profile and group students based on how they performed just on the diagnostic on geometry. That's easy to do, okay? That will be an alternate way to group students if you just want to do it by one domain. So something to think about. And then vocabulary has come up for a lot of schools. So I'm going to bring up one specific example of what one school did for vocabulary, because they saw vocabulary really being an issue in 4th grade, I believe. So that's a good middle of the range of grade to pull from. What they actually did was said, okay, if vocabulary is an issue, we can't trust it to happen for homework. If this is that big of a deal, we just can't trust that. We need to make it a part of our daily instruction every single day. So every week or every time they start new units, it might be for 2 weeks or so, they look at what the big academic vocabulary is for the 4 units that they're teaching. They have a word wall, and they put up maybe 10 to 15 words. And then during class, they explicitly teach that. On Monday, they explicitly teach what those words mean. During centers, they do some context clues type activities to work with students on building that vocabulary, and keep all the instruction during class. And then on Friday, they of course assess students, but they're assessing students the whole time on that academic vocabulary, but explicitly making it a part of their in-class instruction. So just something to think about, and that's really been working for that particular school. Okay. All right, so let's talk about our big things in Johnston County. So end of the year alternate indicators. End of the year for waivers. Here's what we're looking at. One of the alternate indicators is for students to be at mid-level. If students are at mid-level, that means they've mastered enough of the current grade level standards. So if we're talking about a 5th grader, they've mastered enough of the 5th grade Common Core standards to be considered proficient, according to iReady. So if they get to mid-level by the end of the year, that is an alternate indicator. Another one is for them to meet target growth, which remember is 1 year of growth. That's page 3 of your handout. For our virtual people, remember that is in the Google Drive, and your schools are bringing back some handouts of that, but meeting 1 year of growth for their grade level. And you can measure that, of course, manually or by the growth monitoring report. And then for 3rd grade, an RTA, alternate indicator, this is 3rd grade only, is for students to hit a 537. This is only for RTA. This does not count for these 2. Only for RTA, if they hit a 537 by beginning of year, middle year, or end of year diagnostic, it will count. not growth monitors. It has to be a diagnostic. Growth monitors are too short for it to get a true measure of where students actually are. Okay? You have access to this, of course, but we're going to move forward. All right, the Strive for 45. Someone asked about this earlier. Keep in mind where this comes from. When they did research, they looked at students who spend an average of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, all the way up to 2 hours per week on our ready instruction to see which students showed the most gains. At 45 minutes, that seemed to be the sweet spot. That's where that 45 minutes comes from. But consider your resources. Which students do you really need to make big gains? And in a lot of cases, it's probably your students who are below grade level. Maybe not every student we need to shoot for that 45 minutes of instruction because they may not need it. They may be above grade level. They may be at grade level, and they don't necessarily need that as much. They're already showing mastery. But for your students who are below grade level or significantly below grade level, that's a good place to use your resources, especially for those of you who feel like you can't get everybody in for that full amount of time. Okay, we just want to be sure we clarify that. For best results, use your resources wisely and use with purpose. Okay. Just for K-5, investigations and iReady. Keep in mind, investigations is your core math curriculum. iReady is just your support. So investigations is what should be happening every day during that math class. Then you pull in iReady if you need some support for students who are well below grade level and have those skills gaps. They can be used together, like you can assign lessons to students that are aligned with your current unit if you wanted to. That's not a problem at all, but please do not use one system to replace the other, if that makes sense. Okay, and this happens a lot. Students get to topics that they haven't covered yet, and we get kind of, oh, this is not good, this is not good. Actually, it's not a bad thing, because it means students are starting to master things that maybe we haven't even covered. They already have mastery there, and they're already showing it. So don't fret. Use it as background for content that's going to come, because it's going to come to them eventually, because this doesn't go above 12th grade level in instruction. Sorry, it doesn't go above 8th grade level in instruction. And use as one of many ways for students to understand a concept or a skill. We actually witnessed this happen in a middle school recently. A student came across volume of a triangular prism, and they hadn't covered that in class, and the student explained the formula that he was taught of how to do volume of this prism. And they happened to be a CMP3 class, and so the student explained the formula, and then the student, and he said, I know that because I learned it in iReady. And the student across from him said the perfect response, and I would encourage any teacher to say this as well. The student across from him said, yes, but why does that work? That is a great way for teachers to come into play as well. iReady is teaching one way. It's great for them to understand the background of that too. That's where the conceptual piece of math comes in. That's what investigations is about, and that's definitely what we want students to understand in terms of math as well. So keep that in mind. We do want to show you guys our district growth, just as an FYI. Just in short, this is comparing the percent of students who are on grade level at the beginning of year versus the middle of year. I apologize for my Common State fans here, but the Carolina blue is beginning of year. The Duke blue is my middle of year. So you want to see the dark blue bar be longer than the light blue bar, and that's happening in every single grade level in reading and every single grade level in math, district-wide. We have not seen that for every single school, so if you feel like you're not seeing the same growth as the district, maybe look into that a little bit more. We'll look at some best practices in a second. One other thing we look at is how are we increasing in terms of our domains. So this one actually represents the percent of students who are the opposite, below level for Johnston County Schools for beginning of year versus the middle of year in each grade level for each of the different domains. Great news. We are continuing to see gains in every single domain in every single grade. We are decreasing the percent of students who are below level in every grade in every domain. If you really want to focus in on something, vocabulary might be a good area because we still have over half of our students who are below level in vocabulary. We've really put a dent in that, but we still have a significant number of students who are below level in that area across the district. And until we increase our vocabulary, our comprehension is only going to go up so much. Also keep in mind for vocabulary, that aligns with the language goal area for the EOG. So that does align with EOG Common Core standards. In math, similarly, we do see gains in every single area, every single grade. We especially see this in K-5, which makes us very excited for investigations and the impact that is having on our students' overall math comprehension. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, if you really want to focus in on an area for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math, we may want to focus in on our numbers and operations and our algebra and algebraic thinking, because we still have half or over half of our students who are below level. Both of those units have already been taught, mostly, except for maybe some 8th grade, but those are very significant parts of the curriculum, and I'll prove it to you. In 6th grade, numbers and operations and algebra and algebraic thinking is 75% of our curriculum. In 7th grade, same thing, and in 8th grade, it's about 75%, maybe a little bit less, maybe closer to 60% of our curriculum. So please keep that in mind if you're looking in. And one caveat for any 7th grade teachers out there or who are watching virtually, algebra and algebraic thinking actually does include ratios and proportions. We assumed it was under numbers and operations. It actually falls under algebra. So keep that in mind. We do still have about half of our students who are below level in those areas. So some things to think about of how to use iReady purposefully. Maybe consider using iReady to help do that spiral review, bring back in some lessons that correlate with those particular topics so they don't lose that mastery later on in the year. One more thought, if you didn't miss that, closer to 70% of our students are below level in geometry, which is still a significant part of 7th and 8th grade curriculum, and that doesn't come in until later in the year. So consider using iReady to preload some of those geometry concepts so that you don't have to catch everybody up all at once at the end of the year. You can preload some of those concepts before we get there, okay? If you're interested in how MClass and iReady align, we always provide this to you. We do have some goal setting recommendations that we've provided. You have access to this. In general, have students shoot for making 1 year of growth or have students shoot for being on grade level, whichever one really gets them there. For our students at grade level, make a goal of being at late level by the end of the year, because that means they've mastered everything in the curriculum according to iReady. Or making 1 year of growth. For our students who are already at late level or above grade level, have them shoot for a year of growth. For our students who are below grade level, have them shoot for making 1 year of growth or being on grade level by the end of the year. That would help either way. And for students who are well below grade level, we really need to shoot for more than 1 year of growth. If not, they'll never catch up. Okay? And if you're shooting for instructional goals, most schools have found it much easier for students to actually measure the physical number of lessons passed rather than their time on task. It's just a lot more measurable for students. It's a lot easier for them to count. I passed 2 lessons rather than I've been on here 17 minutes. It's just, it gets tricky. Great lesson, but it just gets tricky for students. We have provided some templates that some schools have provided for students to goal set. Those are provided in our bit.ly iReady 2015. Please feel free to use those, or we actually had 2 of our schools share at our last data session how they're actually making things work in their building. Benson Middle shared how they're doing student conferences, keeping students accountable for their learning. And Forks Elementary shared how they're doing goal setting in grades K-5 and actually shared all of their templates with us, which was very kind of them. And so you actually have access to that and can use those. We actually asked a few schools to share what their teachers are doing to really see big gains. So if you click on the View Best Practices button, you'll be able to see what those schools shared. And for most of them, you'll see that they actually shared that what made the difference was goal setting along with meeting students where they are when they're failing lessons and not just trusting, but stepping in and facilitating their instruction as they're working online is what many of them said. But please do click on that, because a lot of that came directly from teachers. They actually submitted what they did to make it effective. Okay, just want to share that with you. And of course, we have tons of tools for parent communication, including the parent symbols. Raise your hand if you know these are here. Okay, moving forward, virtual people, everybody in the room raise their hands. For parent reports, raise your hand if you've already sent home reports to parents. Okay, virtual people is like 75%. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be 100%, and they're just ready to go. Most people are sending home parent reports, which we love. If that's what you've been sending home all year, continue to send home the parent report. We did notice recently that the student profile overview is actually pretty reasonable too. We wouldn't tell you to change mid-year if parents are used to the parent report, stick with the parent report, but we really like the student profile overview pretty well too. So consider that as well, okay? And you can print both of these as batch reports. I know that's a big deal. You can print both as batch reports. And last couple things, tips for moving forward. We want support in lots of different ways. So here's some different ways. Of course, we have our shared iReady JCS Google folder, but we really want to be sure you're getting as much as you can out of iReady. So every week we send out iReady 1-minute tips. Sometimes they're 2 minutes, sorry about that. But to anybody who subscribes to receive those. So raise your hand if you get iReady 1-minute tips. Virtual people, 100% of hands just went up. Please feel free to subscribe to that. And of course, we have an iReady coaching session coming up as well, where those 2 consultants will come out to your schools and work with teams as you need. That is March 14th through the 21st. Your principals will get a full calendar, but you've already registered for that. Who to call? Us. I'm Katie Wall. This is Jenna McKeel. We were left without adult supervision today, but Christy Stevenson and Kathy Hamilton are happy to help you as well. Many of you can actually come up with some technical questions that we can't fix, issues with lessons and stuff. Those just need to go straight to technical support. Please feel free to call them or email them. They're really friendly, and they're really help out a lot. And ready materials come through her. But that's all of the big stuff. The last 2 things, both virtual and our face-to-face participants need to do is, of course, go to this survey, provide us feedback. It's bit.ly, iReady 2016. And if you would, please be sure that you have signed in using the digital sign-in, iReady March 4th. So I'm going to put up one for a minute, then I'm going to put up the other for a minute if you need to jot them down. Once you've done that, if you have anything that you need to email us, we're happy to support you however that we can. But otherwise, for our virtual people, this is the end of today's presentation and today's workshop. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you accommodating the change in schedule. To our face-to-face participants, I believe our virtual participants did not even know there was anyone here, but I can promise you they are if they want to yell out real quick. Yeah, that wasn't me. So there's definitely people in the room and you didn't even know it. So glad that everyone was able to be here. Thank you so much for being here on a Friday afternoon. Let's all give ourselves a round of applause for joining in and surviving. And have a great weekend.